There. The game's done. Now we just need to critique it. Critique it as what? As a story? As an RPG? As Digimon media? Good. That's 3 whole videos. That should be enough to hold us over for the rest of the month. I'd rather keep the box positive if it's all the same to you, but we should consider ourselves a bit of an authority when it comes to these things. Of stories in Digimon, who else sits in the center of the Venn? That's as good a sign as any for us to make our move. Let me write you a picture. I want to talk about disappointment, and assure you all that what I have to say is positive. Digimon Story Time Stranger is the best Digimon game ever made. I think Cyber Sleuth is a better story, I think the DS games look better, I think most of the boss fights and practically all of the dungeon crawling stinks, but my opinion holds true. I grew up with Digimon. Dawn and Dusk captured my heart, Cyber Sleuth hooked my adult mind, I've written dozens of fanfiction, workshopped the tabletop RPG system, and I've had it in my heart deep down that if Bandai just went all out and gave this franchise the love it deserved, we could have a Digimon renaissance on our hands. And deep down, I was sure that Time Stranger would kick that off when it finally came out. The picture is one of a hopeful fan. And if that isn't a red flag, I don't know what is. All I wanted was for this game to be good. I wanted the story to invest a brand new audience into the world of Digimon, and I wanted it to kick about with the more mature tone and themes that we experienced fans all adore from it. I wanted an RPG that capitalizes on the flexibility of Digimon's core, and gives you lots of unique and varying challenges that require different kinds of teams to beat. I wanted to feel confidence that this is the start of something special. Confidence that this franchise that I love will get to revel under the spotlight for just a bit. I expected that it would. And for what it's worth, it does. This is an excellent casual Digimon experience. It feels familiar, and rightfully smothers the players with choice of how their team fills out and grows. It makes great use of the 2 different worlds as settings. But, oh, there's a lot of buts. And but is where the rest of the script comes from. There are so many little places where this falls short as the product we want it to be. We could spend hours just talking about the things we would have done better. Talk like that gets you kicked out of here, Sams. You're making a mistake. You have to be mindful when you critique something. That critique can be just as fiery and vitriolic coming from a place of passion as it can be coming from a place of hate. Outward criticism should always aim to be constructive. Or so we feel. And if you keep that criticism to yourself, then the focus should be on adopting good from the bad you perceive. Keeping things positive is how you make them productive, and if your preferred method of engaging with others' creations is breaking them down with hammers, maybe you should reevaluate some things. That kind of mindset primes you to take hammers to your own creations as long as they're not perfect. Bad is bad whether it's objective or subjective. If you don't like something, no matter if that opinion comes from well thought out evaluation or just an itch in your gut, that's valid, and you need to figure out what you can make out of that feeling yourself. Let's hit some examples while the ideas are still fresh. New. You and me, let's talk about how Time Stranger handles immigration, integration, and discrimination through the 3 most prominent parties. Already? Sure. The long and short of it is that during the events of the story, we find ourselves caught up in a conflict between 3 groups. The Digimon, the Titans, who are the evil Digimon that the whole of the digital world discriminates against, and the humans, who are split between the people who like Digimon and the people who really don't, and build a wall to keep them segregated and drag the ones who slip through the cracks off to camps where they experiment on them. Yes, this is real. And for a story about 2 worlds coming together, that's a really compelling framework. Yes, we know where the story is going to end, with the worlds coexisting and everyone singing Kumbaya, but that doesn't lose it points. The intrigue comes from the journey to get there and the things that set this conflict in place to begin with. The Titans rose up to wage war against a higher being who governed everything in the digital world, in a fit of trying to take control of their lives, seeing the existence of that higher all-governing power as a shackle they needed to break. You can't have a story like this without ambitions of freedom. And after being defeated, were deemed treasonous conspirators by that higher being, were exiled, branded as villains, and had histories spun around them in a way that made them seem like horrible monsters. Which, all the things that piled up to make Digimon discriminate against others of their own kind being made up by one person in power who didn't like them is kinda right on the money. It's definitely a promising reveal, because it doubles down on the obviously set up idea that at the end of all of this, everyone's gonna realize discrimination is bad, and the real evil is the one making us fight amongst ourselves. But the game sends them off at the end of the penultimate dungeon with a, looks like now we can escape, this little partnership of ours has come to an end. Don't let your guard down, kid, because we're gonna get you, because we're evil. And then they're not in the story anymore. We're given all this talk about the damage that can come from one person in power spinning a narrative against their people and creating an other, and it just turns out that the other, after being given all of the narrative and personal reason in the world to reach across the aisle and make things right, was actually just a bunch of evil conqueror types all along and want to stay as the other in regards to the digital world. Oh yeah, no, even if history was fabricated to make you hate them, you should still discriminate against the other, because no matter what the truth is, they actually are evil. I'm gonna go put a hole in the drywall. which means it's up to us to carry on. All of this conflict stems from Chronomon's ego and the higher entity being a dick. If the Titans weren't forced to fight and feud with the rest of Iliad, then they wouldn't have spilled over into the human world and wrought the death and destruction that led to all the Digimon being discriminated against by the humans. The Titans are a class of Digimon, an arbitrary class created as a label for the bad Digimon by that higher being. The Digimon make the Titans into monsters, and the Titans make the Digimon into monsters in the eyes of humanity. This web of bigotry needs to end with all three parties teaming up and fighting that higher entity in the end. The boss said no workshopping. If we're going to critique something, we need to critique it for what it is, not what it could have been. There are things that the story could have done better, but it had good ideas and executed on them for the most part in good faith. There's a laundry list of things that we could nip and pick at, but that doesn't change the story we have and the things we can learn from it. Time Stranger is a great study in the consequences of losing sight of your themes and message as you close in on the end of your story. But its ideas are all intact, developed, and strong. A narrative about immigration is a fantastic template for a Digimon story, a time travel story, and a story about a fantastical creature forced to live in a mundane world. And while I still really don't like Aegeomon, that part of his story was definitely compelling enough for me to let him just being a human with satyr stuff going on slide. I still wanted more, there were far more things that rubbed me wrong, and even more that felt underdeveloped. But it was enjoyable, and if this were someone's first Digimon experience, I doubt they'd be left unsatisfied. At least the game was pretty fun. The Digimon collecting was. The roster's fantastic, easily the best we've ever had. The personality system's really interesting and heavily rewards both completing side content, something I have a notoriously hard time powering through, and planning ahead, something I always have a blast with. The trademark branching trees always left me on the edge of my seats whenever I hit a new level, because even if I knew most Digimon by name, the way they were silhouetted had me scratching my head or outright guessing wrong until those magic doors swung wide and I got to see my prize. But as a game itself, I went into this hoping for a challenge, and for an opportunity to share all sorts of new and cool Digimon with an audience that might find one to fall for. I was expecting a wide variety of good challenges, and even locked in on hard so I'd have to take team building even more seriously and show off different Digimon strengths. But there's a fundamental problem with that Cyber Sleuth didn't have, and it's Aegeomon. Aegeomon is the main character of this story, and is in your party for around 80% of the game. He's the one Digimon you should always be able to rely on, and that means that most bosses in the game have to be weak to Aegeomon, so that he performs well and you're always happy to have him around. There are 33 bosses in the game after you recruit Aegeomon, and 24 of them are weak to vaccine-type Digimon, and by extension, Aegeomon. There are 4 who are strong against him. That means there are 9 boss fights in this 50-hour game where you don't want to bring a full team of vaccine-type Digimon. And 3 of those fights don't have a type, so they don't reward you for bringing something that isn't a vaccine team regardless. There are 109 vaccine Digimon you can use throughout the game, not counting the Mega Plus Digimon you only get for the last dungeon, or the 6 different forms of Aegeomon. And that's out of a non-Mega Plus roster of 423. 314 of the Digimon you can raise are detrimental to use outside of a handful of boss fights. In a game where the primary draw should be collecting creatures and letting the Digivolution system sculpt your Digimon into your own special team. I'm not saying that none of the bosses in Digimon games should have an attribute, I'm suggesting that, okay, that's enough out of you. But even if we disagree with the reason, we know why they did it. We know that now that's something we want from our games even more than before. And we can assume that we're not the only person in the world who probably got upset when they kept having to put their favorite Digimon on the bench for something better. But that's a product of our expectations. Yes, I think it's objectively bad game design to not have a balanced array of major challenges that let different party members and strategies shine. But that sentiment comes from a subjective place, and I still begrudgingly understand why they did what they did. Some of the most fun I had in this game was just bringing Grand Kuwagamon along to fights. It wasn't coming up with complex team lineups or strategies for fights with cool mechanics. Even though there were cool fights with cool mechanics, and I would have loved the opportunity to change my strategy to suit them, it was constantly having one of my favorite Digimon with me and having the luxury of tuning it to suit my needs. It was having a familiar face around who I was happy to feed frags and fanfare into and getting to use it in a unique and interesting way that I never have before. It was something that, in my 60 hours of playing and experimenting with everyone else, only a single Digimon could give me, and that felt pretty bad. But there's nothing to be done with that. There absolutely is, though. Tell us how you'd change it. Paint a picture in our minds. Spin us ideas of the way these shortcomings could have been flipped to turn this decent game into a masterpiece deserving of our favorite unappreciated franchise. All that's gonna do is make people like this less. I really don't want that. You're raising their standards by showing them what could have been. But what is still good. I enjoyed every second of playing Time Stranger, doubly so because we did it on stream. Twitch.tv/theboxinthemiddle, live Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Because there's nothing in this world I want or enjoy more than sharing things with all of them. And I'd rather we all share the things we like. Regardless, it's a compelling story for lots of casual readers to enjoy, and plenty for critical readers to evaluate and take from. It's a wonderfully expansive and involved collector, even if it's not the most interesting RPG to play. It could have been all those things, but it is still an 8 out of 10. When you judge something, no matter if it's from a place of love or distaste, you need to judge it in good faith. Evaluate it for what it is and where it veers from its promises and potential, but don't change what that potential is, and don't make up things that those promises could have been. At the end of the day, the thing we all want is for the things we enjoy to be the best they can be. And if you think like that, you'll have a lot more fun. You'll see things that others can't. You'll start drawing those all too important lines between the things you expect, the things you want, and the things you're given. And you'll start being inspired by disappointments instead of being beaten down by them.